In a world where women were told what they couldn't do, one woman refused to listen. Born into hardship, driven by curiosity, and fueled by an unbreakable will, she changed science and history forever. This is the story of Marie Curie, the woman who lit up the world with radioactivity. In 1867, a girl named Maria Salomia Skłodowska, who the world would one day know as Marie Curie. This is the story of her beginning, the story of a fire that refused to be extinguished. Our story starts in a Poland under Russian rule, a place of political turmoil and stifled dreams. Yet, within the walls of the Skłodowski home, a different world existed. Her father, a teacher of mathematics and physics, and her mother, a headmistress, cultivated an environment where curiosity was the most valuable currency. For young Maria, or Monia, as her family called her, this home was a sanctuary of learning. Books were not just objects, they were gateways to other universes. Science wasn't just a subject, it was a language that explained the magic of the world. From a very young age, Monia's mind was exceptionally bright. Her memory was astonishing. She could recite long passages of poetry after hearing them just once and absorbed information with an intensity that baffled her siblings. School was less of a challenge and more of a playground for her intellect. She consistently finished at the top of her class, her hand always the first to shoot up, her answers sharp and precise. While other children played, Monia could often be found tucked away in a corner, lost in a book, the flickering candlelight dancing in her wide, curious eyes. Her hunger for knowledge was insatiable, but the world outside her family's embrace was not so welcoming. In 19th century Poland, higher education was a fortress guarded by men for men. The University of Warsaw was closed to women, a stark and unyielding barrier. For Monia, this wasn't just a rule, it was a personal injustice, a direct challenge to her very existence. How could a world so full of wonders deny her the chance to understand them? This question burned within her, fueling a determination that would come to define her entire life. For a time, her vibrant spirit seemed to dim. Yet, through this grief, a resilient core of steel began to form. She learned a harsh lesson. Life was fragile, and time was precious. There was no moment to waste. As she blossomed into a young woman, her dream of a scientific education did not fade. It intensified. If the official doors were closed, she would find other ways. Monia and her sister Bronisława made a pact, a secret alliance against their circumstances. Monia would work as a governess, sending her earnings to Bronisława, who would go to Paris to study medicine. Once Bronisława was established, she would then help Monia come to Paris to pursue her own scientific dreams. It was a risky, long-term plan, built on trust, sacrifice, and a shared, desperate yearning for a life beyond the one prescribed for them. So began a period of quiet, grueling work. Monia took a position as a governess in a wealthy family, far from the intellectual stimulation of Warsaw. The days were long, filled with teaching children who often had little interest in learning. The evenings were her own. In a small, cold room, after a full day's work, she would unpack her worn-out textbooks on physics, chemistry, and mathematics. She taught herself, devouring complex theories by the dim light of an oil lamp, battling exhaustion and loneliness. These were her secret years of study, a clandestine university of one. She was forging her own mind, sharpening it like a weapon for the future she was determined to claim. During this time, she even organized a secret school for the local peasant children, teaching them to read and write in Polish, an act of defiance against the Russian authorities who had forbidden it. This act reveals so much about her character, her innate desire to share knowledge, her courage in the face of authority, and her deep-seated belief in the power of education to uplift everyone. Years passed, every franc saved was a step closer to Paris. Every letter from Bronisława was a beacon of hope. There were moments of doubt, moments when the dream felt impossibly distant. She faced a failed romance that left her heart broken, another reminder of how her path diverged from the conventional. Yet, she never wavered from the pact. The fire within her, stoked by years of waiting and working, was now a controlled, focused blaze. Finally, in the autumn of 1891, the moment arrived. At the age of 24, with a small trunk, a meager amount of money, and a mind brimming with years of self-taught knowledge, Monier boarded a train. It was a fourth-class carriage, crowded and uncomfortable, a multi-day journey across the continent. But for her, it was a chariot to freedom. As the Polish countryside faded into the distance, she wasn't leaving a home behind. She was racing toward one. She arrived in Paris, the city of light, the intellectual heart of the world. It was everything she had imagined and more. She enrolled at the Sorbonne, one of the few institutions in Europe that accepted female students. Now, she was no longer Manya. In this new city, this new life, she became Marie. But the struggle was far from over. Life in Paris was a new kind of hardship. Winters were brutal. She would pile all of her clothing on top of her blankets just to fight off the freezing cold. She was often faint from hunger, but her hunger for knowledge was always greater. In the lecture halls of the Sorbonne, she was finally among her peers, or rather, she was in her element. Surrounded by the greatest scientific minds of the age, she was a sponge, absorbing every lecture, every equation, every theory. She had found her tribe, her purpose. The years of secret study paid off. She was not just keeping up. She was excelling, her brilliance shining brightly even in this city of luminaries. This was the crucible that forged Marie Curie. The girl from Warsaw had endured loss, poverty, and prejudice. She did not know it yet, but standing on the precipice of her new life in Paris, she was about to embark on a journey that would not only fulfill her own dreams, but would forever change her understanding of the universe. The stage was set, the protagonist had arrived, and the world of science would never be the same. This wasn't just a change of city. It was the beginning of a new identity. In Paris, she became Marie, and this city, brimming with intellectual fervor, would become the crucible where her destiny was forged. She had found her place, a world pulsating with the energy of discovery, surrounded by minds that, like hers, were relentlessly curious about the universe's secrets. It was in this vibrant scientific community that she met Pierre Curie. He wasn't just another scientist. He was a brilliant physicist, head of a laboratory at the School of Industrial Physics and Chemistry. When they first met, it wasn't a story of love at first sight, but something deeper, a meeting of minds. Pierre was immediately struck by Marie's fierce intelligence and her unwavering dedication to her research. He saw a brilliance in her that many of his contemporaries overlooked simply because she was a woman. Their conversations weren't about pleasantries. They were about magnetism, crystallography, and the mysteries of the physical world. He found in her an intellectual equal, a partner in passion. A year later, they were married, and Marie Skłodowska became Marie Curie, forming one of the most legendary partnerships in the history of science. Their laboratory was far from glamorous. It was a damp, drafty shed, more like a glorified barn than a place of scientific revolution. It was cold in the winter and stiflingly hot in the summer. Yet, this humble space became their sanctuary. Here, side by side, they embarked on a journey that would change the world. Their work began with Henri Becquerel's accidental discovery that uranium salts emitted mysterious rays, similar to X-rays. Intrigued, Marie decided to make this phenomenon the subject of her doctoral thesis. This was a bold move. The field was brand new, the path completely uncharted. Using a sensitive electrometer designed by Pierre and his brother, she began meticulously measuring the faint electrical charges emitted by uranium compounds. She quickly made a startling observation. The intensity of the radiation depended only on the amount of uranium present. It didn't matter if the uranium was pure, pulverized, or in a solution. This led her to a revolutionary hypothesis. The radiation was not the result of a chemical reaction, but an intrinsic property of the atom itself. This idea shattered the long-held belief that atoms were indivisible and unchanging. Her investigation didn't stop there. She tested other elements for this strange property and found that thorium also exhibited it. She coined a new term for this phenomenon: radioactivity. But the most exciting discovery was yet to come. While examining pitchblende, a uranium-rich ore, she found it was significantly more radioactive than pure uranium itself. The logical conclusion: there must be something else in the ore, a new, undiscovered element that was far more radioactive than uranium. Pierre, recognizing the monumental importance of his wife's findings, set aside his own research on crystals to join her quest. What followed was an epic feat of physical and intellectual endurance. To isolate this unknown element, they needed to process tons of pitchblende. They obtained the raw ore from a mining waste pile in Bohemia and began the painstaking work of chemical separation. Imagine them in their shed, surrounded by huge vats, boiling and stirring cauldrons of toxic, bubbling liquid. Marie, in her dust-covered apron, would spend entire days stirring a boiling mass with an iron rod nearly as tall as she was. It was grueling, back-breaking labor. They faced constant setbacks. Funding was almost non-existent, forcing them to finance much of their research out of their own pockets. The scientific establishment was deeply skeptical. Many couldn't believe that a woman, an immigrant no less, could be on the verge of such a fundamental discovery. And all the while, they were unknowingly exposing themselves to lethal doses of radiation. They suffered from burns, exhaustion, and chronic pain, what we now recognize as the symptoms of radiation sickness. Yet, their resolve never wavered. They were driven by the pure joy of discovery, the thrill of peeling back another layer of reality. After nearly 4 years of relentless effort, in 1898, their perseverance paid off. They successfully isolated not one, but 2 new radioactive elements. The first, they named polonium in honor of Marie's beloved occupied homeland of Poland. It was a patriotic cry from the heart of an exile. Just a few months later, they announced the discovery of a second element, several hundred times more radioactive than uranium. They called it radium, from the Latin word radius, meaning ray. The scientific world was stunned. To prove its existence definitively, they still needed to isolate radium in its pure, metallic form and determine its atomic weight. This took another 4 years of even more intense labor, culminating in 20th century alchemy. They had successfully refined 1/10 of a gram of pure radium chloride from over a ton of pitchblende. In 1903, the Nobel Committee announced the prize in physics would be awarded to Henri Becquerel and Pierre Curie for their work on radiation. Initially, Marie's name was omitted, in a move that spoke volumes about his character and their partnership. Pierre insisted that he would not accept the award unless Marie was also recognized for her foundational role in the discovery. The committee relented, and Marie Curie became the first woman in history to win a Nobel Prize. This victory was not just personal, it was a landmark moment for women in science everywhere. But their life was about to take a devastating turn. In 1906, tragedy struck. Pierre, while crossing a rainy street in Paris, was struck and killed by a horse-drawn carriage. Marie was shattered. The world had lost a great scientist, but she had lost her partner, her collaborator, and the love of her life. In the depths of her grief, many expected her to retreat from public life to fade into the background. She did the opposite. The Sorbonne offered her Pierre's professorship, a position he was meant to hold. In accepting, she became the first female professor in the university's 650-year history. Her first lecture began at the exact point where Pierre's last one had ended. She poured her sorrow and her energy back into her work, determined to continue the scientific legacy they had built together. She established the Radium Institute, a world-class laboratory in Paris dedicated to research in chemistry, physics and medicine. Her solitary work led to yet another monumental achievement. In 1911, she was awarded a second Nobel Prize, this time in chemistry, for her work in isolating pure radium. This made her the first person, man or woman, to ever receive 2 Nobel Prizes. And to this day, she remains the only person ever awarded Nobel Prizes in 2 different scientific fields. But her work wasn't confined to the lab. When World War I broke out, Marie saw an immediate application for her discoveries. Knowing that X-rays could locate shrapnel and bullets in wounded soldiers, she developed mobile radiography units. These vehicles, which became known as petites Curies or little Curies, were equipped with X-ray equipment powered by a dynamo. She, along with her teenage daughter Iran, drove these vans to the front lines, training medics and operating the equipment herself, potentially saving over 1 million lives. Marie Curie's legacy extends far beyond her 2 Nobel Prizes and the elements she discovered. She fundamentally altered our understanding of the universe, proving that the atom was not the final, indivisible building block of matter. Her work laid the foundation for atomic physics and the nuclear age. Her discoveries in radioactivity revolutionized medicine, paving the way for modern radiology and the use of radiation to treat cancer. But perhaps her most enduring legacy is the sheer power of her example. She was a woman who navigated a world that was often hostile to her ambition. She faced xenophobia, sexism, personal tragedy, and financial hardship. She pursued knowledge not for fame or for fortune. The Curies famously refused to patent their radium isolation process, foregoing immense wealth so that the scientific community could research it freely. She did it for the sake of understanding, for the benefit of humanity. Marie Curie's life story is a testament to the indomitable power of the human spirit. She proved that no obstacle, not poverty, not prejudice, not profound laws can extinguish a mind ignited by curiosity and driven by purpose. Her light continues to shine, inspiring scientists, dreamers, and trailblazers to this very day. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through the life of a true icon. If you found her story as inspiring as we do, please give this video a thumbs up. And do not forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more stories about the people who changed our world. We'll see you in the next one.